Hello, beautiful platform engineering community, DevOps enthusiasts, brothers and sisters in arms in our fight against developer burnout, repetitive tasks, and cognitive overload. Well, it's happening. We finally can say that we have a PlatformCon yearly tradition, and I'm super happy to be here with you today. My name is Mathieu Frenette. I am the Director of DevOps at Nesto in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. I've been a software engineer for quite a few years now, and like all of you today, I'm sure I love everything that surrounds platform engineering. Last year on PlatformCon 2022, I gave a talk entitled on growth challenges, generic Helm charts, golden paths, and abstraction levels. If you haven't watched it, I encourage you to have a look at it. Today, I'll try not to get into too much transcendental stuff or universal truth, but rather stay down to earth and really focus on the very concrete strategies that our team is using to try and make our platform happen. We'll talk today about making time for what matters, reclaiming control of our own ship, building our MVP, and transitioning devs to our platform. If I was to ask everyone here today what their idea of the perfect platform for their company or their team, I'm sure everyone would be like, hey! So I'm sure that even if we ask ChatGPT or Bard or Copilot what their idea of a perfect platform is, I'm sure they would have their own idea. Maybe something like this, or maybe if we have a larger budget, like this, or a smaller one. But that's not the point of today's talk. We won't tell you what your platform should be, what it should look like. We'll try to see what we can do to make it happen in the midst of everything else. Because let's face it, our days are filled with unplanned work, support tickets, access requests, new infrastructure to provision, meetings, which all leaves us with very little time to work on our dear perfect platform. So let's start by how to make time for what matters. So we figured that uh, we shouldn't wait for the ideal moment with an official mandate to focus solely on that project. We said, okay, let's just take the initiative and go ask. So I went to my VP of engineering and I asked him, can we allocate 20% of our team's time to building the platform? And guess what? He said yes, because he understood it was important and the proposal was reasonable. It was just enough time to make it working, to make it possible, but not too much to detract us from the other things that we needed to achieve in our days. But then to make sure that this 20% time gets actually used, that it gets leveraged, we reserved in our team's calendars sessions every week to work together to further the project, to discuss, to ask the hard questions, to design, to create tickets, to groom them, to create specs, and to prepare the work. And we affectionately call those sessions our DevOps Jam sessions. And to be quite frank, these are my favorite times of the week. But then we also book time on our own to work on the platform so that when we go back to work, we are sure that in our week we won't forget to allocate some time to the platform. And then we used a tool, a schedule management app, to help us preserve those precious focus times. And in our case, we are using Clockwise. We have no affiliation whatsoever with Clockwise. We just love the tool. There are many others out there that do similar job, but that's the one we picked. So that has made a great deal of difference in making sure that our calendars didn't get super fragmented. We also defined and shared with the other teams our team API, which describe how to best get in touch with us in a streamlined and efficient way in order to reduce the noise, to make sure that we understood what their expectations were, what were the level of priority or of urgency, and that we can all streamline that into a single or as few channels as possible. And talking about noise, we also realized that we could split the responsibilities within the team based on our individual strengths and interests. We realized that one of us was super socially inclined, that he was happy to just be on the front line, to be the one talking to developers, to take in all the requests through Slack, to turn them into tickets, to check the boxes like quickly throughout the day to make sure that we gave a great service to developers. And that is making him happy because he loves to do that kind of work. And it also greatly reduced the noise on the rest of the team to help us focus on the platform development itself and the other things that we needed to achieve. One other thing that was generating a lot of noise was continuous requests from developers to get special access to, let's say, a production database or to a production Kubernetes cluster. And these were taking up a lot of our time. It was repetitive work that could easily be automated. So we currently are putting in place a commercial solution to automate that, to allow developers to do self-service in terms of privilege escalation, and it will greatly free us from having to do that on a daily basis. Reclaiming control of our own ship, which can also be called paying off your technical debt. And this is something that we quickly realized that if we didn't address that technical debt, it would be pretty hard to make large scale changes to our infrastructure, our CI CD pipelines, our way of deploying, of managing everything. So that's very a tough part. It's something that is really foundational work that needs to be addressed first. We started by standardizing our infrastructure via infra as code. We did the same thing with our CI/CD pipelines, which were scattered everywhere. It was tons of copies of similar pipelines with just a few tweaks here and there, but it was very difficult to make changes to those pipelines in a coordinated fashion. So we standardized those into templates that we are now managing via infra as code with different parameters for the different use cases. And we did the same thing with our Kubernetes deployments by creating a generic Helm chart for all our deployments. So instead of having tons of copies of Kubernetes manifest for each project, we centralized that, standardized it into a generic Helm chart that can be reused across the board. And that's exactly the topic of my talk last year if you're interested in learning more about that. So my takeaway advice for this part is really be patient, be courageous, because it takes a lot of time to do that, a lot of effort. It's not glamorous work. It's not highly visible. It doesn't shine, but in the end, it pays off. It allows to make big changes afterwards. It allows to be in control of everything you want to put in place instead of being constantly fighting with the chaos around you. Building our MVP. So I had the great opportunity to start at Nesto as a backend developer. And that has helped me to put myself into the shoes of developers to experience what they are living through, like firsthand, to understand their challenges, their pain point, what is causing friction, and but we didn't limit ourselves to that understanding. We used surveys and workshops to gather as much information as possible and feedback from the developers to create this big picture understanding. And then we use that to think big. We wanted to envision the ideal solution and not be conservative there. Really create ourselves a North Star, even if we knew that we would not get there in a day. We pick the best of breed solutions to avoid reinventing the wheel. In our case, it's Argo CD, Crossplane, Elm, and others. And we only added the little missing parts to glue all of that together and turn it into a very seamless and smooth solution and developer experience. And in our case, we named that part Joy, and it's something we'd like hopefully to make open source someday when it's ready. And it's made up of a few custom CRDs, a Kubernetes operator, and a CLI for developers to interact with the system. Then we broke down that big picture into viable steps, into manageable chunks, and decided what would be the very, very minimal first step that we could do as an MVP. And that's tough. That's a very tough exercise, but it's necessary to be able to deliver value as quickly as possible. And given the little time that we have to spend on the platform, we want to be able to deliver something not when everything will be finished and ready, but really very early on. In our case, we also narrowed down the scope of that MVP even further by reducing the initial target audience to only early adopters, assuming that they would be willing to put up with having to do a few steps or a few operation manually, not having all of the features that the full audience would expect or require. So that has allowed us to make it even smaller, that MVP. So we're working on that as we speak. Now, transitioning developers to our platform. We started with, as I said, our early adopters by moving them to our generic Helm chart very early on. As soon as we had that generic chart ready, we didn't want for the whole platform to be ready to have them start to experiment with it, get used to it, migrate their services to it. And for that to work, we had to create temporary pipelines that only them would be using. It's really a compromise, but it has allowed us to really lower the bar to entry when the platform comes, and not platform con, but when the platform comes, it will be really easy for them to move to that platform because all their services will already be on the generic Helm chart, and they will be used to it. They will be familiar with it. So that's one of the way we found to make that transition smoother. There's also a tool that all developers are currently using to manage their releases, to cross-promote between environments, to see what's deployed where. And that tool, we tweaked it in advance to make it forward compatible with what's coming, because we want the old and the new to be able to coexist in parallel, so that we can make that transition more progressive, smoother. And it was a really small change that we needed to do in that tool to make it work with what's coming. So developers will be able to keep on using their existing tool, their old way of working, with the new platform working in parallel. So services will be uh, like distributed as hybrid between the old and the new platform. Whew. So here we are, super happy to have made it thus far, but the journey is not over. There's still plenty of ground to cover. The journey is just starting, actually. So next, we'll need to migrate our early adopters to the MVP when it's ready, to gather feedback from them, and to add the few features that will be required to target a larger audience, and then to progressively migrate everyone else to that platform. So that's going to be made like ideally we're hoping in in 1 week iterations, one team per week, and eventually everyone will be moved on to the new platform. Finally, we are hoping that the next iteration, after we have closed that large gap, which was really challenging, we're hoping that the next iteration will be much smaller ones, much more manageable and faster and shorter, because we'll be working on all the new platform, and we won't have constantly to consider the old ways. So that's our hope. That's all I had for you today. Thank you all for watching this presentation. I hope it will hopefully help you or inspire you in your own platform journey. I also wanted to extend a special thank to my colleague Felix for his precious support in preparing this presentation. And I wish all of you to have a great PlatformCon, and we'll see you around in our wonderful platform engineering community.